He didn't even know me, but he saved my life. I remind myself of that every time I replay the moment, the second the world tilted and everything I thought I understood about danger, about chance, and about the fragile thread we all hang by, snapped tight around me. It was a Tuesday, 10:14 a.m., late spring, the kind of day that tricks you into thinking nothing bad could possibly happen because the sunlight is warm, the air is clean, and the world seems almost generous. I was heading downtown, hurrying because I was late again, weaving through the sidewalk crowds with the kind of distracted urgency that makes you forget how fragile you are. I remember glancing at the crosswalk light, seeing the timer blinking down from 5, and stepping forward without thinking. I didn't see the truck, not at first. I heard it. A brutal roar, too loud, too close. Then the blast of a horn, sharp and panicked. When I turned my head, the world slowed. The truck skidded, tires screaming, barreling toward me with the inevitability of a falling building. I froze. People talk about fight or flight, but nobody mentions the third option, paralysis. My legs refused to move. My breath stalled. My body braced for impact it could not outrun, and then something grabbed me, hard, yanking me sideways with a force that knocked the air out of my lungs. The truck tore through the space where I had stood a heartbeat earlier. The gust of wind off its side slapped my face. Metal shrieked. Brakes smoked. And for a moment the world existed only as noise and shock and disbelief. I hit the ground hard. My ears rang. My vision pulsed. And when I blinked up at the sky, trying to understand whether I was alive or imagining the world around me, I saw him. A stranger. Early 30s maybe. Dark jacket. Rough hands. Breathless like he had sprinted straight out of nowhere. He didn't speak at first. He just stared at me like he wasn't sure if he had actually pulled me out of the way, like maybe he thought he had grabbed me too late. It took me a moment to sit up, my heart hammering in my ribs as the people around us murmured and hovered, their voices muted by the adrenaline pounding in my ears. I tried to thank him, but the words dissolved on my tongue. He nodded once, still catching his breath, still watching me like he needed to be sure I was really okay. When he finally spoke, his voice was low, steady, the voice of someone who had been in dangerous situations before. "You almost didn't make it," he said, no judgment, no accusation, just fact. In the hours after the incident, after the police took statements and the truck driver apologized 100 times, and pedestrians who had witnessed it drifted off back into their lives, the stranger stayed near me. He told me his name was Daniel. He told me he didn't know why he looked up at that exact second, why he saw me stepping forward when I did. He just reacted. Body moved before I thought. He said, still rubbing the back of his neck like he was trying to make sense of it. I believed him. There was nothing rehearsed or heroic about the way he said it. It was instinct pure and uncomplicated, but the simplicity of his explanation didn't match the complexity of what had almost happened. It didn't match the shock still echoing through my bones. I kept replaying the moment in my mind, wondering how close I had come to being erased without warning, without intention, without time to say a single word to anyone I cared about. When the crowd finally dispersed, he walked with me toward a quiet bench near the plaza. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely hold my phone. I tried to laugh it off, but the sound came out brittle and thin. Daniel watched me for a moment, then asked if there was someone I wanted to call. I opened my mouth to say yes, but no one came to mind, not really. Not anyone who wouldn't respond with annoyance or obligation. And that realization hit harder than the near miss with the truck. He didn't push. He didn't offer hollow comfort. He just sat with me in silence until my breathing leveled and the color returned to my vision. What I didn't know then, what no one around us that day knew, was that danger has a way of echoing, that the moment the truck nearly ended my life was just the beginning of something else, something darker, something that had been creeping toward me long before I ever stepped off that curb. And Daniel, the stranger who saved me once, would soon be the only person standing between me and the kind of destruction you don't walk away from. That night, around 2:03 a.m., I woke up to a sound outside my apartment door. A soft scrape, a pause, another scrape. At first I told myself it was nothing, that the near-death experience had rewired my nerves, made me jumpy, made me hear threats where none existed. But then the sound came again, low, deliberate, unmistakably human. I sat up in bed, heart pounding, and listened. The hallway was quiet otherwise, too quiet. No footsteps, no movement. Just the sense that someone was out there, holding their breath the same way I was. I waited 10 minutes before I dared to stand. The peephole showed nothing, just the dim hallway lighting and the door across from mine. But when I bent down, there on the floor, barely visible unless the light hit it just right, was a piece of metal. A broken shard, a fragment of something. I picked it up with shaking fingers. It was part of a lock-pick. By morning, my anxiety had grown into certainty. The attempted break-in wasn't random. And when I replayed the day before in my mind, replayed the moment the truck came at me, the question I had tried to ignore pushed to the surface. What if the accident wasn't an accident? I kept telling myself I was being dramatic, paranoid, traumatized. But the truth felt heavier than my excuses, and that's when I called Daniel. I didn't plan to. My fingers dialed before my mind caught up. When he answered, he sounded startled, half asleep. But when I told him about the noise, the metal fragment at my door, his tone shifted instantly. Not skeptical, not dismissive, sharp, focused. "I'm coming over," he said. An hour later, he was at my apartment examining the door frame, the lock, the hallway. He ran his thumb over the metal shard and looked at me with an expression that made my stomach flip. Not fear, something more complicated. This wasn't an amateur. He said quietly, someone knew what they were doing. I asked him what that meant, but he didn't answer right away. Instead, he asked me a question I wasn't prepared for. Is there anyone who'd want to hurt you? The truth was complicated. I wasn't involved with criminals. I didn't owe money. I hadn't witnessed anything or crossed anyone dangerous. Or so I believed. But 2 months earlier I testified at a workplace hearing involving a co-worker, someone volatile, someone who had threatened people before. The company brushed off the danger. HR played it down, but the man had glared at me across the conference table with eyes full of quiet hatred. I tried to forget that look. I told myself it didn't matter. But now, replaying it under the fluorescent light of my apartment, everything felt different. He listened without interrupting. Then he stood, pacing once before turning back to me. "If he's who I think he is," Daniel said, "you're not safe here." That was the moment the weight of it all hit me. The truck, the break-in, the co-worker, the coincidence that didn't feel like coincidence anymore. My throat tightened, my hands went cold, and Daniel, who just 24 hours earlier had been a stranger, saw the panic before I voiced it. "Hey," he said, lowering his voice, "you're not alone in this. I'm here." He didn't have to stay. He didn't have to help. But he did. He insisted we file a police report. He walked me through each step, steadying me when I stumbled through the details. And even though the officers took notes and nodded, I could see in their eyes the same dismissal I'd seen from HR. No clear evidence, no forced entry, no video, no witness. They told me to stay alert and call if anything else happened, as if vigilance alone could stop a determined threat. Daniel didn't accept that. On the walk back to my place, he scanned every shadow, every doorway, every passing face. He wasn't paranoid. He was prepared. It was as if he'd done this before. I asked him about it, and he hesitated before answering. "A long time ago," he said. "Different situation, different person, but I didn't get there in time." That was all he gave me, but it was enough to understand why he reacted the way he did. The next 3 days blurred together. Daniel stayed close. Not invading, not controlling, just present. He slept on the couch. He walked me to work. He watched the areas behind us without making it obvious, and for a while things were quiet. Too quiet. Then Thursday came. It was 9:47 p.m. when the power went out in my building, not the whole block. Just my building, Every light snapped off at once, leaving me standing in my kitchen in sudden darkness. My phone buzzed with the emergency generator alert, but the backup didn't turn on. I felt the dread immediately, heavy and electric at the base of my spine. I reached for my phone, and before I could dial, it lit up with a message from Daniel. "Don't move, I'm on my way." That was when I heard it, the faint, slow creak of the stairwell door opening at the end of the hallway. Someone was inside the building, someone moving quietly, someone who didn't want to be noticed. I killed my phone light and pressed my back to the wall, listening. My heartbeat thundered in my ears, threatening to drown out every other sound. Then a new noise, footsteps, not hurried, not stumbling. Controlled, coming closer, my apartment door rattled. I held my breath. The handle turned softly, testing resistance. Then again, harder, and again, a new sound followed. A click. The same kind of click a lockpick makes when pressure slides into place. I wanted to scream. I couldn't. My body had frozen again like it had the day of the truck. But before the intruder could breach the lock, before I could break free of the paralysis, a crash erupted from the hallway, violent and explosive. A shout, a struggle, a heavy thud. I didn't know what happened until Daniel's voice cut through the darkness. "It's okay. Open the door." When I swung it open, the hallway lights flickered back on. A man lay unconscious on the floor. My former co-worker. His jacket pocket bulged with metal tools meant for breaking and entering. His face was twisted with rage even in unconsciousness. And standing over him was Daniel, chest heaving, face pale, hands shaking. "He was coming for you," Daniel said quietly. "The police arrived minutes later. This time there was no disbelief, no doubt. The evidence was undeniable. They took him away, cuffed and furious, still spitting accusations I couldn't hear. As they led him out, Daniel stood beside me, silent, steady, as if he were absorbing the shock for both of us. And in that moment, I understood something I hadn't been able to before. The truck hadn't been fate. The break-in wasn't coincidence, the danger hadn't been imaginary, someone really had been hunting me, and the only reason I was alive, truly alive, was because a stranger saw me at the crosswalk and decided not to look away. In the days that followed, people told me I was lucky. They told me it was a miracle, but luck feels too flimsy a word for what happened. Fate feels too impersonal. What saved me wasn't chance, it was a person. A single human being who acted when no one else did. He didn't know me, he didn't owe me anything, but he saved my life more than once. And every time I think about how close I came to disappearing, quietly, unnoticed, wiped out by someone else's anger, I remember the moment Daniel's hand grabbed my jacket and pulled me out of the path of a truck. The first moment my life was saved. The first moment everything changed, and I know now, with absolute clarity, that heroes don't always look like heroes. Sometimes they're just people who happen to be standing close enough to catch you when the world tries to break you. In the weeks afterward, I kept expecting the fear to fade, for normal life to settle back over me like dust on a quiet shelf. But the mind doesn't forget how close it comes to vanishing. It doesn't forget the echo of footsteps in the dark, or the sense that danger can slip through cracks you never noticed. I found myself waking in the middle of the night, listening for sounds that weren't there, pacing the same path from window to door with my heartbeat still wired to that Thursday night. And yet, even in the worst moments, I wasn't entirely alone. Daniel checked in on me, even after the police finished their statements, after the restraining order was filed, after the detective assured me the case was airtight. He didn't hover. He didn't try to become anything he wasn't. He just showed up in quiet ways. A message asking if I'd eaten, a walk around the block when the anxiety got too loud, a reminder that healing wasn't supposed to be instant or graceful. I asked him once why he stayed involved, why he didn't just save me that first time and walk away. He thought about it longer than I expected, then said, "Because I know what it feels like to be left alone with fear." He never gave me the full story about the person he failed to save years ago. I didn't push. Some wounds don't want retelling, but I saw the shadow in his expression when the topic brushed too close, the tightening in his jaw, the way his eyes drifted away like he was staring into the past. Whatever happened marked him deeply enough that saving me wasn't just instinct. It was redemption. By the end of the month, my apartment felt different, not haunted, not tainted, just smaller, like the walls held the memory of everything that almost happened, so I moved, not far, just enough to breathe again. Daniel helped me pack the last of the boxes, joking that I owned too many books, complaining dramatically about the weight of the heaviest one, as if he hadn't tackled a grown man in a dark hallway without hesitation. In the new place, sunlight pooled across the floor in the mornings. I started sleeping again, not well, not deeply, but enough. One afternoon, as we carried the final box into the new apartment, I asked him something that had been circling my mind since the day of the near miss. Why were you there, at the crosswalk, at that exact moment? He leaned against the doorframe, breathing steadily, and shrugged. Bad timing for you, good timing for me. Then, after a pause, he added, or maybe the other way around. I didn't press further. Some answers don't need dissection. The trial took months to finalize. I testified behind a screen because the prosecutor didn't want him seeing me again. I expected to break down on the stand, expected the memories to claw at me until I couldn't speak. But when the moment came, I felt something unexpected. Strength, not defiance, not bravado, just the simple, solid knowledge that I survived something designed to erase me. When the sentence was handed down, I didn't feel triumph, just closure. A quiet door closing at the end of a long hallway. Life didn't snap back to perfection after that. Trauma doesn't vanish on command. Some days I still scan crowds too carefully, still flinch at sudden noises, still replay the hallway in my dreams. But those moments grow softer with time, lighter, and they are balanced by the memory of everything that went right. The hand that grabbed me, the footsteps that ran toward danger, the voice that said, "I'm here," when the world went dark. People ask me sometimes if I believe in fate now, if I think everything is connected by some invisible thread, that people cross paths for reasons we'll never fully understand. I don't know. Maybe, maybe not. But I do know this. We underestimate how fragile we are, how easily our stories can end, and how profoundly they can change because of one person who chooses to act. When I think back to the moment I stepped off the curb, I remember how ordinary it felt. How routine, how impossible it seemed that my life could hinge on a single misjudged step. And yet, that was all it took. One step, one truck, one stranger, if Daniel hadn't looked up, if he hadn't reacted. If he'd hesitated a fraction of a second, I wouldn't be here to tell this story. That truth sits with me every day, not as fear, but as reminder. A reminder that the world is unpredictable, yes, but also full of people capable of extraordinary courage at completely ordinary moments. Sometimes I catch myself watching crowds differently now, noticing the quiet kindnesses most people overlook. The person holding a door for someone with full hands, the teenager helping an elderly stranger cross the street, the commuter who stops to pick up someone else's dropped belongings. Small things, forgettable things, but maybe those are the threads that hold us together, the proof that even in a chaotic world, we are not entirely alone. I don't know where Daniel is now. We keep in touch loosely, messages, occasional calls, updates that drift in like postcards from a parallel life. He moved out of the city a few months after the trial ended, said he needed a reset, needed distance from the memories that resurfaced while helping me. I understood. I still do. Our connection wasn't built on obligation or friendship or anything that fits neatly into a category. It was built on a moment, a single, life-altering moment that bound two strangers together in a way neither of us expected. Sometimes I wonder what he thinks about it now, whether he looks back on that day with the same surreal clarity that I do, whether he realizes that his decision, one instinct, one movement, became the dividing line between my life before and my life after. I hope he does. I hope he knows the weight of what he did, not as a burden but as truth, because the truth is simple. He didn't even know me, but he saved my life. And the echoes of that moment still live inside me, shaping the person I've become, reminding me of the thin line between tragedy and survival, reminding me that even in the darkest moments, there are people who run toward the danger instead of away from it. And sometimes those people arrive as strangers just long enough to save you, just long enough to change everything. This is true.